Okay, good evening, everyone. How are you today? My name is Christine Pomerantz. I'm the chair of the Department of International Trade and Marketing for the fashion industries at FIT, and I'm pleased to welcome you and our distinguished keynote speaker, panel, collaborator, and of course, our dean. So this is in celebration of ITM's 20th anniversary. We have 300 students and over 1,500 graduates pursuing careers in global marketing, management, finance, logistics, sourcing, education, research, foreign policy, name it, we do it. And so we're very pleased to collaborate with Professor Subhash Midha, a colleague of mine at New York University. And he was the one who really is the brainchild of this session tonight. We are especially thrilled to be collaborating with him because academia and global executives now recognize the advantage of openness and tolerance to different kinds of people as a way to attract talent and mobilize new ideas. Through FIT's own Diversity Council, our president, Joyce Brown, is deeply committed to fostering an understanding of the value that diverse teams bring to the community and global organizations. Tonight's event will help to underscore this plan and build a lasting imprint on a bright and compassionate group of undergraduates. And now, to open the event, I am pleased to introduce our energetic dean, Stephen Frumkin, Dean of the J. and Patty Baker School of Business and Technology.
Thank you, Christine. It's really an honor to be here this evening. And yes, I am the Dean of the J. and Patty Baker School of Business and Technology and at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all. In the interest of diversity, I see we have men on one side and women on the other. I had nothing to do with that. So let me first thank Christine Pomerantz and Nicole Martin and the entire faculty and professor for putting this event on. This is not the only event like this that you do during the year, and I know that how difficult they are. We have you'll appreciate the Baker Scholars dinner going on right now, and you were a Baker Scholar, different Baker at Harvard, downstairs on the 6th floor. So thank you for this. I'm pleased to welcome you all, and I hope you realize that this event highlights the importance of diversity in the global workplace. Any of you that are students here understand that we embed that in all of our courses and all that we do, and you know that the Diversity Council, as you mentioned before, reports directly to the President's office here at FIT. We aim to prepare our students for management and leadership positions in the creative industries. The creative industries are within themselves about as diverse as any industries can possibly be. As innovation is increasingly more important and a key differentiator for such companies, these firms have come to view an inclusive workforce as a key to driving the creation of new products and services, building a competitive advantage, growth, and success. So tonight's discussion is of great interest to our students. Many of them are out here today. I am pleased to be the one to introduce Ms. Nicole Arnaboldi, Managing Director and Vice Chair of Credit Suisse Asset Management Division, as our keynote speaker. She was a Baker Scholar at Harvard University and spent her entire career fostering diversity. In addition to her financial background, she will discuss her involvement in volunteer organizations as a driver of this powerful instrument to success. You can find details of her career in the program. I won't go into that, but please help me in welcoming Nicole. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm really delighted to be here and talk about a topic that I'm passionate about, which is diversity. And I've spent a long time working in a large financial services company, and so I've really had the experience of seeing how that industry has evolved a lot on this front. And I think it's not unlike many other industries, and I've seen from our panelists that you're going to hear a lot more from experts on this topic. I'm not an expert on diversity, although I'm passionate about it, but I have been a frontline manager for many years in financial services, and I can tell you from that perspective how important I think diversity has always been, but particularly now recognized as becoming central to success in our business. So I thought I would start by just kind of giving you some historical perspective on how corporations have thought about diversity over the span of my career, which of course when I started child labor laws were violated, but I've been doing it a long time. So I have a long perspective on this topic. So first, when I began working, diversity was basically thought of as a legal issue, kind of managed out of the legal department a little bit because companies were afraid of being sued because there actually were some diverse members of their workforce. And as one manager said to me once, he goes, "My aspiration is to get to the point where we can fire anybody." And it was such a small population that companies were afraid that they couldn't, if they did manage to hire somebody who was diverse, they would always be worrying about were they going to sue the firm, which is not really a good paradigm for diversity in an organization. So fortunately, over time, as our workforce has become more heterogeneous, and as companies in the U.S. in particular have become much more global, they realized that their workforce was becoming more diverse. And some managers started, I think, looking at it through the paradigm of it's the right thing to do. We should definitely have more diversity. It's not just about the lawsuits. And that paradigm also, as you might guess, has its limits because there would typically be the debate about, well, isn't our mission to make as much money as possible? And, you know, this is in there with philanthropy and it's a nice thing to do, but it's not central to our mission. And so that was improvement in a way, but not really. And then I guess the next stage was when companies started looking around and realizing, for example, I mean, fashion's a perfect example, that most of the customers were women, and that maybe they should have some women in their organization to face off against all their women customers. And many of the buyers were becoming women. So it was almost a marketing paradigm to say, oh, well, we should have some people that look like our clients. And that obviously is maybe part of a puzzle of why a diverse workforce is a good thing, but certainly not the entire story. So what's been so happy about the evolution, in my view, about diversity in corporate America and beyond, is that now people recognize it's not really an issue that people argue about, that diversity is economically an imperative to attract and retain the best talent out there. And so that's very gratifying that I think most companies are out there and recognize that. Not to say that the challenges of managing a diverse global organization have gone away at all, and they remain, and they're heightened by the amount of collaboration and the complexity of large organizations, but it's come a long way from the days of a few tokens around to avoid getting sued. So now I always look at it not just through the paradigm of what you say, like, oh, it's an economic imperative, we should do it, but what's the evidence that it is economically important to do this? And there's some really interesting data around this, and in particular, even our firm has a research institute, because that's part of what we do, that looked at what happens when you have a more diverse workforce. And they looked at women because that was easy to measure and an easy place to start, and basically they did a study recently that said that companies with more than 15% of the top management as women generated an ROE, an average ROE, a return on equity for those non-finance types, of 14.7% as compared to 9% for companies that had less than 10% of their senior executives as women, which is a pretty astounding number. I mean, that's a huge gap in performance between companies that have women, so more diverse workforces, and companies with less diverse workforces. So as a shareholder of a company, you should be asking your companies, maybe not everyone in here is a shareholder, but major institutional shareholders should be asking the companies that they invest in, how diverse is your workforce? Because the evidence is, if it's not, your returns are going to be lower. So I think that's a really interesting piece of the puzzle. The other thing that's been really interesting that really doesn't have to do with diversity per se, but has been studies around what makes for good managers. And there's been some really interesting work on this done, like what are effective managed teams in organizations? And people at Google have studied this, and people at various business schools have studied this, and I'm sure you guys may have talked about it in your classes. But what I found really fascinating is that it turns out that couple of the key factors that drive what's an effective manager are things that tie into diversity. So for example, one of the key things that they found was that empathy. So the stronger a manager is correlated highly with their amount of empathy. And they actually studied this. This was really strange. They studied it by looking at sets of eyes and asking managers to guess what the person was feeling. And if you got the closer you could guess to what emotion they were trying to show, the more empathetic you were viewed as being. Now, to be empathetic, you got to understand what a variety of people are thinking. And so it ties completely into diversity, because you can't be a good manager of a diverse workforce if you're not empathetic and able to read people who are different from you. So I thought that was one interesting dimension to it. Another one was empathy. Are you empathetic? Do you listen? Are you sympathetic? And are you understanding of different points of view? And again, you can't be an effective manager generally without that, but you certainly can't be an effective manager of a diverse group if you're not empathetic to people who have very different backgrounds and points of view than you have. So it's a really interesting correlation to me between what I think is important to be a good manager of a diverse workforce and a good manager, period. So those two concepts are really starting to come together, because the other thing that I think it's Google has found is when they tested different teams, when they had a kind of a set up environment, they found that the performance of the teams that were diverse were much better than the teams that weren't diverse. So diverse work teams are clearly, and Google is, the master of data analytics on this kind of thing, and they're out there saying, we know this makes a difference, and so they have a huge diversity initiative to make their workforce more diverse, because they know it will lead to better results. So I think it's a really interesting trend that we're seeing globally. So why is everything not rosy today? So I guess I would talk about some of the obstacles that I think remain and what to maybe do about them. And we could talk all evening about it, and I'm sure our panelists here will have lots of great thoughts on this. But I thought I would touch on a couple of things that I think are really important. And the most important one to me is actually kind of interesting, because it's nothing to do with diversity per se. It's about unconscious biases. Everyone has unconscious biases, and the problem with them is we don't know that we have which ones we have. And so your behaviors can be a function of things that you don't realize that you're thinking, and assumptions you're making to shortcut mental leaps. And so what happens in business is that there are a number of these unconscious biases that I think are problematic for basically achieving a truly diverse global workforce. So one of them, for example, is likability bias. So people tend to like people who are like them. So if you don't kind of think about that consciously, what I've certainly seen over my career is managers tending to revert to their comfort zone. And their comfort zone is nurturing and promoting somebody who's just like them but 10 or 20 years younger. So you really have to think about that consciously. Otherwise, you're not going to have a diverse workforce. You're just going to have people that are in your look like you, and that's not going to lead to the most effective outcomes. Another interesting variation, by the way, on likability, a different take on it, is that there's some really interesting research on this, and a number of the things I'm going to quote now come from work that's been done by McKinsey. And there's a bias, because I've been basically in charge of a lot of our diversity efforts around gender, around women. So there'll be a bias in some of my quotes that I'm throwing in things from that derive from that. But it turns out that they've done studies that show that women who are more likable are deemed less effective as managers, and men who are likable are fine, but women who are too likable aren't deemed as effective, and of course women who are too aggressive are not deemed as effective. So I actually had this interesting discussion. I spoke last week at an organization called Women's World Banking. And it was a woman from, I think she was from probably Asia, she might have been from Pakistan, and she was talking about her problem in the bank that she helps run, where all the guys are so aggressive all the time. And the women are not aggressive like that, and the men just dominate every meeting. And so what we talked about was the fact that you have to, as a leader, take that on, those norms on, and really bring, let's say, train those men to understand that they're not going to have effective decision-making if half the room is silent or a quarter of the room is silent and not contributing to the discussion and the decision-making. So it's really interesting biases that you find out about. So the fix for that, and there are many other biases. One of my favorite, this is a story about my own background, was evaluation bias. So people come up with, like your performance evaluation in some big company will have a series of metrics you got to check off. Did you do a great job, not so great job? When I was a junior investment officer in a venture capital firm, one of our criteria, that all the other people were guys, and one of the criteria was goes for the jugular. So I thought, well, that's probably not something I aspire to. I mean, I hope I don't do well in that. But of course, I was dinged at the end of the year. They said, well, you're not so good on this go for the jugular stuff. And I said, why would we want to go for the jugular? We're trying to develop long-term relationships with companies. So anyway, so that gives you just some idea of the biases that can kind of weave their way into evaluation processes in subtle or not so subtle ways, and then impact the career progression of people that aren't deemed to score well on those norms. So I think that's really something to think about. The other one that is, I think, particularly important for a lot of women is what's called maternal bias. So the bias is that women with children especially can't work. Like, it's too much to handle it. And in fact, that's a legitimate concern. But a lot of people leap to the, well, it can't be done conclusion. So when I was pregnant with my second child, and I hadn't told people I was pregnant, I had lunch with a friend of mine who was my age, young at that time, young, and he said to me, I know you can work with one kid. I don't see how anyone could work with two kids. And I thought, wow, probably not a good time to tell him I'm pregnant. But but these are the people. These are the young people. I hate to think what the older guys are thinking when I go in there telling them I'm expecting my second child. So I guess I proved them wrong. As one of the members of our board said to me the other day, that he said, you're the survivor, and you've made it through, and you have 4 kids. So you can do it. It just requires work and luck and being in the right place at the right time, I think, and grit, and maybe a willingness to go by with a little bit less sleep per night. So the big fix for this is training. It's remarkable, right? If you take a group of smart people in a room and do a bunch of examples of unconscious bias, people actually get it. And I've seen, frankly, some of the managers that I work with whose performance has really been, I would say, almost transformed by being made aware of their biases. And that is a key. So for a global organization to have effective cultural diversity, I think this is kind of like number 1 on my list. Everyone needs to be made aware of those biases so that they can consciously work to overcome them and work effectively with everybody in the organization. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the lack of leadership from the top. Now, it's not what you might think that is, because every company says diversity is really important to us. We value people, everybody, irrespective of background, whatever. But there's another interesting survey that was done recently that said while almost 100% of companies, the CEO says that diversity is really important to the firm, less than half of the employees of those same companies think that the CEO thinks diversity is important. So there's a bit of a credibility gap there, and that's a problem that then means that the organization isn't fully behind making sure that the workplace is as open as possible. And so you can end up with biases in recruiting, in retention, in development, in training, not because people are actively discriminating, it's because they're just not thinking about the importance of these issues in their daily managerial duties. So the fix for that is CEOs definitely have to take the lead on this, and senior management definitely has to take the lead to not just say this is important, but walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So making visible success stories where people have done, celebrating the diversity in the firm, and also calling people out on it if they're not effective. So if you have a manager who has a lot of turnover and doesn't have effective diversity in their team, you've got to, as a CEO, you should be saying to your direct reports, tell me why isn't that happening in your area? And so CEOs who make that part of the objectives for their senior managers is that I want to see the retention, the recruitment, the retention, the promotion of the most capable people. If they all happen to be white males, that's sending a signal that we got to talk about something, and not just, oh, well, I guess that's what happened. So I think that's really important. And then the last thing is, I think, addressing the lifestyle choices and trying to work with people from around the world, really, on lifestyle choices to make sure you can keep people in the workforce. And again, this tends to happen more for women, but it extends to benefits for partners, time to spend with parents, and fill in to be able to feel like you can be comfortable, to have a manager who's empathetic. When you walk in the door and say, I need to do X or Y, will give you that space to do that. I think making sure that companies do that is really critical. And while companies talk about doing it, they don't really do it today. So again, this McKinsey study said that 85% of companies have part-time work arrangements for their employees, and exactly 2% of men and women in those same companies use those part-time work arrangements. So again, there's a big gap to go. And I think if companies can figure out with technology how to address some issues like this and be a little bit more creative around working with people to say, okay, you've been a huge performer, your significant other is moving to another city, let me work with you to try to see maybe we can do telecommuting for a while. Whatever it is, companies that are serious about this really need to invest in those kinds of solutions to really attract and retain the best people. So lots to talk about on this topic. I really look forward to hearing from all the other the panelists here. But I guess I would just pause there, and I know we'll have Q&A later. But to say that I think that it's incredibly important that we figure this out right, that companies today really recognize that doing this right is an imperative, and I think it'll just continue to improve, but we all have to put our shoulder into it to keep making that advance. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicole. We're very thrilled with the insights that you shared with our students. You're bringing to life what we teach them in the classroom, but seeing it from someone who lives and breathes, what you're talking about, it really drives home the message that we need to be much more culturally aware, that it is key to really having new innovation, new ideas, and hopefully it'll bring the world together. And so now I'm very proud to introduce to you Professor Subhash Midha, my colleague from NYU, who will take over and moderate the panel discussion.
Good evening. First of all, Nicole, it was inspiring. This is what you call the person with experience. Cultural diversity. This is a very common, everyday topic, has been discussed in the corporate world, not only in this country, it's all over the world. It's such an important topic these days that in school, colleges, of course, it's a very dear issue at FIT. It's also becoming a topic at the top level where the president will be selected and how we can conceive this idea of a cultural diversity. So just keep in mind, this is a very important issue which we all should digest and digress to see what impact is making to our corporate America. My interest is to see how cultural diversity is increasing the productivity of a corporation or an education field. How is it impacting day-to-day life? And you have to look at it not only from a corporate point of view, you also have to look at it, how it's affecting the job market. How is it affecting the small businesses? I give you a very interesting example. I'm a global strategy advisor for India, so I travel very frequently back and forth. Last year, I was traveling by a foreign airline from New York to Bangalore, which is a IT hub in India. Earlier, the flight used to take off from JFK, will stop in London, and then we continue the flight. Knowing that there are so many business people are going to India these days, the airline decided to fly directly. So the Boeing has come up with the flight which can fly for 14 hours. Now, I just want you to start thinking, how is it affecting the businesses? Now, when I boarded the flight, 70% of the people in the flight were non-Indians. They were all heading to Bangalore. And the interesting part is this thing that they have the music, which serves all the international community. The food was served. So all these jobs were created. And the impact is the growth of jobs. Now, when I landed in India, I went to visit. Bangalore is a city where there's a hub for IBM and the GE. That's where most of the patents after New York or after USA are created. So I walked into one of the IBM office to see one of my friends, and can you believe 30% of the employees were not from India? So the culture diversity which we are discussing, or the diversity which we're discussing in USA, it's also applying all over the world. Now, that was a major city and major company. Next week, I decided to travel to go see one of the villages which I have adopted in India and provide them with education called Ekal Vidyalaya. I was shocked to see that this village, which is such a small village, no passage, only the bicycle can take you there. There were 2 Americans teaching there. Now, that's the culture diversity. So my interest is how has it impacted day-to-day life, and how has it impacted your life, and how has it impacted the small businesses all over the world. Saying that, I'd like to start with our panelist, and I will introduce the first one, Derek Burks. He's the Director, Talent and Culture at the ShopTeeks.com. Would you like to say something about yourself?
Yes. So first of all, thank you to FIT and ITM for having us. It's ShopTeeks. We're growing very, very quickly. We're in the midst of launching our product into 5 new international markets. So when we heard about this opportunity, we were super excited to come here and speak to you guys about that. Over the past couple of years, I've been involved in recruiting for several startups here in New York City. And then prior to that, I worked for a global company. At the time, they had over 20,000 employees. I believe now they're over 30,000. And kind of working with people across different countries and different regions and having that experience. Most of my background is in recruiting and HR. So as we go through the questions today, I will probably tie most of what I talk about back into recruiting. And this is my plug that we are recruiting at ShopTeeks. So we are recruiting for interns and full-time as well. So definitely looking for top talent to enter our company.
All right. Our next eminent panelist is Terrence Clark. He's the president and the CEO of the New York, New Jersey Minority Supplier Development Council. Would you please say something about yourself, please?
Yes, sure. Good evening, everyone. My background's a slight bit different. It has to do with diversity, but it's diversity from a business standpoint, from the standpoint of working to get diverse suppliers into large companies to be able to do business with them. Our organization, of which I am the president and CEO, supports 900 business owners in the New York State and New York and New Jersey area. And we help those business owners do business with large Fortune 1000 corporations. Our goal is to open doors so these business owners can not only grow and develop their businesses, but also put them in a position where they'll be able to hire additional people, add to the economic development and growth of this country, and at the same point in time, be able to look at market opportunities not only on a local basis, but on a regional, national, and international basis. I've been doing this type of work with small and minority-owned businesses probably for the last 30 years, helping business owners start businesses, grow businesses, develop businesses, and look at market opportunities. And our organization is one of 23 councils throughout the United States that do this type of work. So when I look at diversity, we're looking at diversity from a standpoint of how we get more diverse business owners the opportunity to do business with large corporations in the public sector.
Our next panelist is Patricia Goodman Peters. She's the Vice President of Global Rewards, Kate Spade and Company. These are the bags.
And ready to wear, and apparel, and shoes. Thank you so much to FIT and ITM for having me here today. One of our initiatives as a company is where our two axes of growth are product expansion and global expansion. So having a diverse workforce is always top of mind for us. So when I received the invitation from Christine, I was delighted to actually be here today. My background is very similar to Derek's and Nicole. I'm sort of coming at diversity from the people perspective. I obviously work in human resources. Responsible for rewards, but also for learning and development. So the diversity aspect is a very big initiative for us. The way that we think about diversity, and I was so glad that Nicole, I actually felt as if I wanted to steal the beginning part of her speech when she talked about the evolution of diversity, because we're very, very mindful at Kate Spade & Company not to get too trapped by traditional definitions of diversity, and to really take it from the aspect of that we've really evolved beyond just doing it because it's the right thing to do or doing it so that you don't have any litigation. We're really, for us, it's an imperative. We need to have executives and associates working for our organization who are global citizens, who think like global citizens, and come at diversity from that direction. As we move into all these areas around the world, we want to be able to move our associates to the various areas around the world, and the only way that we can do that is if we have individuals who really think globally and who have open minds about diversity. So it's one of the things that we focus on quite a bit. And I just want to tell you a very quick story because Nicole had mentioned the bias. I wanted to tell you a very quick story about my own personal bias. When my undergraduate degree is in dramatic arts and literature. And when I had gone into the workforce and then decided that I was going to go back for an MBA, I thought, wow, I am really going to be the underdog in this situation because I come from this creative background, I have a drama background, I don't know anything about accounting, I don't know anything about finance, and everybody else is going to be coming into that program who have that background. So I was very, very concerned about it, and within a couple of weeks or months of being within the program, I realized that background was my greatest asset because I was probably the only one who could get up in front of the class and do a presentation. And so I took what I thought was my weakness and I parlayed it into a strength, but I also had an eye-opening experience where I saw myself one way. I saw myself as only being capable of doing one thing and not being able to integrate into this other sort of world. So that was a very important shift for me to really realize that it's this collection of experiences and knowledge that come together that really make things great. It's not just having a standard background. It's really that diversity of experiences, knowledge, thought, and culture that come together. So I just wanted to share that with you today.
Thank you. Let me start with the questions, and I'll ask the same question to all the panelists. And my first question is, what does the diversity mean to you? And honestly answer, how does it benefit you and your work? So let me start with Derek.
Yes. So to me, and again, kind of taking this back to recruiting and HR and people, I really do believe that diversity is about being inclusive. I think to me, it's about being surrounded by people who can bring ideas that I can't bring to the table. It's about being surrounded by people who are different, from different cultures, different backgrounds, different regions. And when I think of it from like a business mindset and looking at Shoptiques and the different companies that I've worked for, I really do think that's when some of the best ideas and like the innovative and creative ideas kind of come into place, is when these people from different backgrounds, they get together, they discuss, they chat, and they use their minds to really come up with these creative ideas that they wouldn't have been able to come up with otherwise. And also thinking about this from both my professional career and also my personal life, I don't want to be surrounded by people who are just like me. I think that would be boring. It's not interesting. So I personally want to surround myself with people who are different, that I can talk about and talk about other things with, and really kind of come up with those creative ideas and be innovative.
Great. Terence?
When I look at diversity, I look at it from a standpoint of having equal opportunity to participate. In the work that I do, and also in my personal life, I've seen any number of instances where opportunities are spoken but not given. And diversity, true diversity, is when the playing field is level, when everybody, no matter who they are, what they look like, has the same opportunity to participate, whether it's from an employment standpoint or a business standpoint. What I look at is, if we're talking about business, for instance, we're talking about the opportunities for all businesses to be in the supply chain and be able to provide services and their products to a particular company. And if we're talking about employment, which I've gone through myself, we're talking about the fact that a person is looked upon based on their skill level and ability, and not looked upon based on what they look like, and perhaps the person who they're speaking to does not look like them. I've had a lot of experience in applying for positions where you kind of almost know when you sit down that this is not going to happen because you do not look like the person that you're speaking to. Obviously, I'm African American, a fairly large human being, and that makes people nervous, to be quite frank. And it's something that I've experienced over the course of my lifetime, and hoping that as we move forward in life, and I have a son who's 19 years old, hoping that he does not have to experience the same types of things that I've experienced over the course of my life. If you have companies, and as Nicole mentioned, where diversity is ingrained from the top down, then you have much more of an opportunity and chance to enter these companies, be it through employment or through being a supplier of that company. But if it is not ingrained from the top down, I generally notice that it doesn't work.
Right. I just want to change a little bit here. Christine, thank you for sharing the platform with me, or letting me share the platform with you. Would it be okay if I can ask you the same question from an academic point of view? And Nicole, I want to ask you the same question.
Well, I share the same answer. We have an online audience, so we all have to speak into the mic. So I share the same views as our panelists here, and would like to add, as an Asian, coming into America, first of all, when I first came, I said, it's a good thing I look like them because I don't sound like them. And so it gave me some comfort. But then I was in an organization, Citibank, which really valued diversity. And so I realized that my uniqueness actually contributed to the success of the bank. And so as a result, it became an asset instead of a liability. So for me, it is really optimizing the resources that the world has to offer so that we can achieve what we were meant to achieve.
Right. Terence, going back to you again for a minute. I remember in 70s, when I came to this country, I worked the equal employment opportunity those were the days when the laws were coming into the pictures. And I know what I went through. So do you see the difference from that time to now? I know you're younger than me, but whenever you start looking for a job.
Yes and no. On the surface and in a lot of areas, things have changed over the course of the last 30 years, and there are more opportunities to enter fields, enter employment, and even enter businesses that probably there were when I first started back 30 years ago. But there is one thing that still exists. I mean, there are various laws on the books. There's a variety of different ways to bring out information. But one thing I noticed that you really cannot do, you can't legislate somebody's mind. So if I like you, I like you. And if I don't like you, I don't like you. And I can figure out ways to get around dealing with you if I don't like you. And that I have seen. I mean, basically, I've worked in a nonprofit arena, which I work in now. I've worked for the federal government. I've worked in private sector. And for me to get to where I am today as the president of an organization, I basically had to work for an organization that is geared toward minority business. I don't think I would have had this same opportunity if this was not about minority business.
Thank you. Nicole, you want to add anything to it? You hire people left and right.
Yeah, we do a lot of hiring, and I agree with it. Okay. Is that on? Yeah. I guess I would say, yes, we have many, many miles to go on this journey, that we've certainly made progress, but when I still see in recruiting those subtle biases that we just talked about where, very qualified candidates happen to not get picked. And when you really peel at it, there's no reason other than, I think it's the likability bias that we talked about, that people like people who look like themselves. And unless you really kind of consciously address that, and I think you have to actually, it takes the re-engineering of every process. And, so we've re-engineered recruiting. So, for example, in my area, we did not have great success in recruiting a diverse workforce at one point. And so basically another guy and myself decided we had to sit in every recruiting meeting where selections were being made. And he was an African American male and I was female, and so lo and behold, our recruiting, by just being in the room when the discussions were happening, it made a remarkable difference, and our diversity of our incoming group really changed a lot. So it was just being in the room, it was just highlighting things to people, so things to do, but it's so work intensive and takes so long. I mean, it's going to take, another generation or two, in my mind at least, to really resolve the issues and really have the parity we're looking for.
You have said in your speech about the likable,
Yeah.
and you again have cited the likable. Let me just ask you a question. There are certain ethnics or some individuals who are very good in computer science or some of the subjects. So when you're making a decision to hire somebody, does that thing comes into your mind that, I know I have hired an Indian in the past, and he was very good in computers. Does that comes to your mind when you're hiring people, or you just start very plain ground?
I don't think it comes to, it certainly doesn't come to my mind
Yeah.
consciously, but can I tell you that between myself or my colleagues, somebody isn't unconsciously thinking that? For sure. I think it's very likely. I mean, and there's a whole, but there's other reinforcing mechanisms as well. For example, if there's a critical mass of people from a particular country or whatever in a given, or particular background in a given area, they network and get their friends in, and then the likability bias is they're in favor of hiring people that are like them, right? So there's, so you do get developments like that inside large organizations. So.
Patricia?
No, I agree with all of that. We have the same thing. We have a lot of our applicants. Part of our challenge is that a lot of our applicants are drawn to the brand, and a lot of a lot of our customers happen to be Caucasian 28-year-old females. And so we see a lot of Caucasian 28-year-old females applying for our positions and getting hired for those positions. There have been moments where I've walked into a department meeting and I thought, wow, we need some men here. I mean, very few other companies can say that, where usually the women are outnumbered, but in our organization, we could use some more men, because what you want to avoid all the time is this group think. And if you want to be able to develop products and be able to compete in the world in a variety of different ways, whether it's through product expansion or new technologies or new strategies, you need to have a diverse workforce, and you can't get there if everybody looks and thinks the same. And we do see that pattern repeated throughout the organization. So in our IT area, for example, we do have a lot of individuals from India, and there tends to be that group is dominated by individuals from India. So I think that is so true, that you recommend people into the organization who you know, and who are familiar to you and possibly look and think like you, and therefore that's easy. You know they can do the job. And so you're somewhat unwilling to look at somebody else who doesn't necessarily fit that profile, because you're not quite sure, can they do the job? You haven't really probed into that. So it does happen to us as well.
Well, now we have established that the diversity is the right thing to do. We all agree that diversity increases the sales awareness of any organization. So my question to all the panelists is that, what are you doing to diversify your workforce? Are you making any special effort, or are you creating any special bag, which is more interested to, because I've seen some fashion designers, basically they cater to certain, they have boutiques and they cater to certain ethnic background. So let me start again with you, Patricia.
Yeah, sure. I actually just had this conversation with the head of our international division last week, where he has a frustration that a lot of our marketing materials and our product are all very much U.S.-centric. And so that creates a challenge for him to have his business prosper when sometimes the product translates and sometimes it doesn't. But the marketing especially, we have trouble having that translate. And I don't mean that literally. I just mean that some of the individuals who we choose to have in our ad campaigns might not be as familiar in other parts around the world, or don't resonate in the same way that we've intended. And so part of that also, again, starts within the organization, having a marketing team that's focused on diversity, having it start with that team being diverse, and actually thinking about, well, how is this ad campaign going to resonate around the world? So it's definitely a challenge for us. It's a challenge for us not only in marketing, but also in the product development areas. Different bags, different size bags. In the US, we tend to love large bags. At least I love a large bag. But in Asia, they like things that are smaller. So just those small nuances make a huge difference. And if you're not tuned in to who your customer is, you're not going to be able to make products that they're going to want. So it's not only good for us from a cultural perspective, but it just makes business sense.
Let me just ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
You said that, about creating these bags and all those things. As you know that the country population or the purchasing power of the Asians and other community is increasing by leap and bound.
Yeah.
And even they are born here, but their choice, their taste is still lingers on from their background. So what are you doing in order to attract those, those customers? Because what I see from my daughters or my wife buying your bags, that they are more or less the same in the last 4 or 5 years. What effort are you making to create, or what staff are you using to create those bags which could be attractive, or the other item which you're making to attract that crowd?
Yeah, I would say that we definitely still have some work to do, but with regard to creating products that are more diverse, 2 years ago, Deborah Lloyd, our Chief Creative Officer, she did a whole series. What she does is she has a theme of the month, and then the products are all developed around that theme. So 2 years ago, she did an around the world theme, and we had Mexico, Brazil, China, a variety of different places, and all of our products were a result were inspired by those cultures, and that has that serves two purposes. Number one, it's new and exciting for our customers, but it also gives us insight into what are our customers responding to, what are the colors that they like, what type of customer is buying what. This sort of like gets more into a marketing and merchandising area other than my own. I'm certainly not the expert, but we do apply resources to understanding what our customers around the world want and look to have, and also here in the U.S. as well. We try to diversify as much as we can.
Yeah. Derek, the same question for you.
Yes, I think for Shoptiques, there are two things that come to mind right now. One is on like the product side of the business, and the other is from my perspective, like the people and the recruiting side of it. Starting from the recruiting side, I think for me, it's about teaching and training our managers when they're recruiting. And you know, I'm teaching and training managers who are much more experienced than I am, and I never thought, 16 years ago that I would be at a point in my career where I was training someone to not be biased and to accept diversity. To me, that's insane to think that I have to do that. And I think it's just a sign that as a country, we're still kind of evolving, and this will always be something that we're working on. But I think the biggest challenge is, and the way I think of this aspect of recruiting is in a weird, silly, funny kind of way, but we've probably all heard or seen The Voice, right? The TV show. The thing that I love about The Voice, and I do love the show, but they're not seeing this person that's singing. They're only hearing their voice. So they're assessing their ability to sing and to perform only by listening. And for me, from a recruiting perspective, I absolutely love phone interviews. And I know that there are some recruiters that I talk to that are like, I hate phone interviews, they're time consuming. I know some companies have switched to video interviews to screen candidates before bringing them in, but as long as I'm the recruiter for a company, we will always do phone interviews because I am looking for your passion for Shoptiques. Do you actually want to work for Shoptiques? Why do you want to work for Shoptiques? What is the skill set that you can bring to the team? What are you adding to Shoptiques? And to me, that's the most important part. So I can know that I'm bringing in diverse candidates, so then it's my responsibility to teach and train our managers to set aside their bias, to not think about their own cultural background or beliefs. And we're all raised certain ways, believing certain things, and it's who we are as people. And I think you just have to set that to the side, and teach and train people to really assess skills. And one of the, Nicole was talking about adding in like steps in the recruiting process, and one of the things that we're doing at Shoptiques is ensuring that for each position that we're hiring for, that we actually have hiring metrics and skill sets and like a hiring guide that I can give to the hiring manager when they're interviewing someone, so that they have like a list and like a checklist of things that they're looking for to really think about what that person can bring and what they can add to the team, instead of their cultural background and setting those beliefs to the side. From a product standpoint, we're an e-commerce company. We do specialize in female clothing, accessories, and home goods. And recently, we started recruiting models for our photo shoots that are a little more diverse than what we were recruiting in the past. And we've seen a great added benefit to that. When people are shopping online, they connect to someone that looks like them. that they want to know what that product is going to look like on them, because you can't actually try it on in a store because you're purchasing online. And our customers have called in and, really kind of given us props for that, and being able to connect a little bit more to the brand and what we're providing.
Good point. Very good point. Terrence, you want to share?
And, excuse me. Ours is a little more from a business standpoint. We're trying to get large corporations to look at our clients as business owners, no different than any other business owners. Not to look at this as a social program, but to look at this as a business program that is going to either help them increase profitability, reduce cost, the same thing that any other business owner would do if they're trying to do business with a large corporation or with any corporation. We have a variety of business owners that we work with. We work with business owners who are very small and may have sales under $100,000. We also work with business owners that have billions of dollars in sales. So it's something that surprises a lot of the corporations that we deal with, because they aren't familiar with the fact that these business owners have been able to grow their businesses over a period of time to be able to get to the point where they are today. So that's what we work on. We work on trying to get people comfortable enough to look at this business owner the same manner that they would look at any other business owner. And that takes a lot of doing, because it takes people not only getting out of their comfort zone, it takes breaking that resistance to change. Most people don't like change. You get comfortable with certain routines and certain people. In our case, people get comfortable with certain vendors that they work with, and they aren't really looking to get new vendors. And we have to then work with them to explain and to introduce new concepts and products and services to them that can be beneficial. If you've been dealing with a certain person for 15, 20 years, you've developed some kind of relationship. And we're in the relationship business. And it's hard to break relationships and add new ones for a lot of people. That's one of the things that we work on, and we work on that with our clients to teach them how to do things like that, how to present their businesses, how to present themselves in a manner that people will be comfortable and are open to looking at doing business with these particular individuals that we represent.
Our next question is for Patricia, and then I'll come back to you, Derek. With the cultural diversity, you are getting workers with the different backgrounds. And I can just take my own example. There are times you feel very comfortable in talking in your language. And I'm pretty sure if Nicole has hired IT specialists, say 20, 30, 40, I don't even know how many hundred people she hires, from the same country, and if they start talking the same language, does that concern you, or does that make you feel insecure, or how do you get over that?
No, that doesn't concern us at all. I think that if it felt as if there was something sinister about it, then of course you can see that in body language, and that can happen regardless of which language you're speaking in. But that absolutely would not concern us at all. If that's how a group of people feel most comfortable talking to each other, that's perfectly fine with us. We wouldn't have any issue with that at all.
Yeah, so an interesting perspective for me, because I work for a Swiss company, and Switzerland has 3 major languages spoken there. And so language is actually a big issue for the organization because of the number of different languages the employees speak as their first language. And we actually did make an issue of this, because what we found was in Switzerland, particularly with Swiss German, we actually found people would be having these meetings and laughing, and then they'd switch into English, and maybe you might get the punchline of the joke, but you definitely would feel excluded. And so it led our CEO at the time to actually say, English is the language of Credit Suisse. And so we think it's important, actually, as a unifier, that people aren't left out. But it means that if you don't speak English, you're not going to, unless you learn, you're not going to be able to work at our firm. And it's not that there's anything wrong with people speaking in their own language amongst themselves. It's just it tends to creep out beyond that, and then people do feel excluded. So.
All right, let me come on.
Yeah, so I agree with points from both Patricia and Nicole, and I think, I mean, I've worked, my first company that I worked for out of college, we were like an English-based company. You had to speak English to work for that company. It was a requirement. The past 3 companies that I've worked for after that company, it hasn't been a requirement, and I think at Shoptiques, I mean, we're now just over 50 people. We're still a fairly small organization compared to, you know, a lot of other companies, and it hasn't been an issue. I think for me personally, if we had a team of individuals that were only speaking one language, not at all. I don't think that's a concern, and I think you know, being open and accepting to that is key. But I mean, if it ever became a concern or a reason to be concerned, I can also see Nicole's point of view. And, you know, obviously if people feel that, you know, they're being left out of something or that they're being talked about or, you know, whatever the case may be, then that's something that we would have to kind of think about as an HR team and how we address that.
Terrence, you want to add anything to it?
Well, I mean, from our viewpoint, most of the work that we do is probably conducted in English, but you know, we have a number of business owners that we represent that are diverse business owners that their first language is not English, and you know, a number of them have had some issues and have had to learn how to translate what they do into a language that when they're going to speak to a corporation or a client, that they can do it in a manner that they can present themselves where they sound credible. And, you know, once again, we get back to the whole issue of change, you know, and resistance to change. And if you're used to dealing with people who speak a certain language, many times they deal with buyers, and more times than none, the buyers speak English. So they've had to, you know, learn how to do that while trying to sell their product or service. So that's been, you know, it's not been a major issue, but it does come up from time to time. I mean, I'm looking at the ladies and gentlemen in the audience, and virtually everybody in here, if they ever decide to start a business, would be considered a diverse supplier. So a lot of what, if that's something that you're deciding to do, or you do currently do, that's how you would be viewed. And you know, our goal is to, as I said, to level the playing field so that as those business owners are entering markets, that they have the same opportunities that everybody else does.
Christine, you want to add something to it?
Just from the ITM perspective, 17% of our students are international, but more than half of our students are at least bilingual. Some of them speak 5 languages, and we require them to learn a 6th language through the foreign language classes. And we're working very actively with our liberal arts program so that they can offer other languages. So they're looking to hire a teacher that teaches, that speaks Arabic. And so we're going to be offering that type of language skills, you know, in the near future. We also have organized our curriculum so that the liberal arts complements what the major classes do, and so they can minor in international politics or Latin American studies or Asian studies instead of being required to take classes they feel they don't need for their careers. And so, you know, with that awareness of what's going on around the world. And they're really in our program because they appreciate cultures around the world. They take advantage of study abroad programs and stuff like that, which we didn't during our time. Because of that, it really is a major issue and topic discussed at FIT.
Now, since she brought up the subject of the language, as you are hiring individuals who have the accent or who have the language barrier, what are you doing to assimilate them into your work? Because overall they are very productive and they can really make a difference in your businesses, but they have this barrier. So are you making any special effort to work around that, or let them learn as they work? What are your
Yes, well, I will start off by saying we haven't really encountered that very often, where someone was having a difficulty communicating within our organization. We sometimes have difficulty communicating with our partners around the world because we're very, you can get lost in this being U.S.-centric mode when you're at the infancy of becoming this global company, and you forget that a lot of things don't necessarily translate around the world. So in those instances, we'll try as best as we can to, number one, be sensitive to it, but number two, if things need to be translated, we will hire translators to ensure that everything is properly communicated to those who need it in our various locations.
We, of course, have clients who speak many, many different languages, and so it's actually important for us to have employees who have multiple language skills, so we value that highly. But as I said earlier, I think we do require some level of proficiency in the English language. It does not need to be fluent by any means. And particularly with email, you can communicate. A lot of people are more comfortable communicating in writing than they are orally, and so, and we can certainly provide training. We provide an enormous amount of training globally, including in language skills if necessary. And we also have an in-house translation team so that we make sure that all of our finished product is available in certainly at least English, German, French, given those are the largest languages amongst the clients that we deal with.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the same thing as Patricia was saying. I mean, we haven't really come across this issue at Shoptiques, where an employee wasn't able to communicate to either our boutiques or our customers or internally because of the language barrier. Certainly would make accommodation. I mean, every company that I've ever worked for, there's been a way to make an accommodation for someone who, if English isn't your first language. Nicole was talking about, like, some people are more comfortable with email communication. Every company I've ever worked for, I mean, and now specifically at Shoptiques, like, the volume of emails that are coming in, there's certainly the need for that. And the same on the account management side with the relationships that we have with our 5,000 plus boutiques. If someone is comfortable with written English, there's certainly the ability for that to happen. So.
Would you like to add anything?
About the only thing that I would add is, generally it's not an area that we've really run into on a major basis. Usually by the time business owners get to us, they are able to communicate in English. But as we are moving a number of our business owners to markets overseas and looking at more global opportunities, there may become the reverse situation where business owners now have to learn another language if they're planning on doing business in another country. And that's something that many of them are endeavoring to do, because right now we're looking at opportunities not only in the UK, where obviously people speak English, but also in Central and South America. And a lot of our clients do not speak Spanish, but they see opportunities there, and they're looking at what they need to do to take advantage of those opportunities. And that may include hiring people who speak the language of the country they want to do business in.
Yeah. My next question is that we all agree that cultural diversity is very important to us. Has that improved your working environment?
I would say absolutely yes. It's a benefit for all around, for business, for for every area of our organization to have diverse groups, to have groups where you don't get stuck in groupthink, where everybody is the same and everyone is coming from the same perspective, to graciously challenge each other in our thinking so that we can break through. We can have breakthrough thinking occur throughout the organization. One of our brand promise is to live an interesting life, or to inspire others to live an interesting life, and we really try to live that within the organization. So it has helped us in so many different ways to just think more globally, design more globally, market more globally. Everything that we do now, because everything is moving so incredibly fast, we're all becoming global citizens, but we're doing it through all types of different mediums that move at an incredibly fast rate. So to not embrace that and build your teams with that level of diversity would just not be a wise business decision.
So can I assume that it has increased your business?
I would say so. We haven't measured it precisely to say in a way that we say, okay, this group is putting out, this is a diverse group, they're putting out certain product versus this group which is less diverse, and how are they doing? How do they compare against each other? We actually have not measured that, but the culture that we want to create internally, I think, speaks to the effectiveness of having this global sort of approach to how we build our organization.
And has that increased your productivity?
I would say that it does. Again, we haven't actually measured it. I look forward to the day when we actually do get to a point where we actually can measure this, because I think it's one of the challenges of getting. It's part of the reason why I think we move so slow as a society in moving this needle forward, is because we have tied it to it's a legal thing. It's the right legal thing to do, or it's the right thing to do as a society. It's actually also really, really good for business. And I think until we start to get everyone to realize that it is good for business, it does improve your business, it does improve your reach and the output of your products, that we won't get as much buy-in as we're looking for. But it is hard to measure. At least we're not there yet, but maybe some of the other panelists are at a point where they can actually measure it.
Okay. Nicole?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier about the statistics that CS has measured on ROE of companies that have more diverse workforces. So we see some metrics like that. We see metrics around more diverse boards are positively correlated with better performance. So we know at a high level that there's definitely some correlation between diversity and performance. In our own world, we look at a bunch of different metrics, but there's no silver bullet like this is the thing that shows us that diversity is making our business better. But we look at, are we attracting a diverse population entering the door? Are we effectively, is our yield on when we make offers, are we attracting people from around the world effectively? Are we retaining people effectively? When we look at our retention by people from different backgrounds, is it consistent? Or are people from any group leaving or not leaving as frequently? So we look at the analytics around it all the time. But as I said, there's no one data point that we look at as the magic number that we're trying to manage for. But we think if we take a whole series of metrics around that, that will make us a better organization, because we are firmly of the view that a more diverse organization will be more successful.
Great. Derek?
So to answer the question, I would say 100% yes. I believe that diversity has made a positive impact on the business. Similar to the two ladies here on my left, we haven't necessarily measured whether or not that diversity has, increased productivity or increased our sales or profit. Like, we haven't actually measured that, but So many examples kind of running through my head of how I've witnessed it be impactful. And I think, we're partnered with over 5,000 boutiques around the world. Currently, we're, in addition to the US, we're in Canada, the UK, and France, launching in 5 new international markets this year. Our account management team, they're on a daily basis, they're in communication with these boutiques around the world. And I've seen our employees step up in ways that they probably wouldn't have felt comfortable otherwise, like speaking to a boutique in French or in Spanish. And it's certainly something I think has been impactful, and you need that in order to build rapport and to ensure that these boutiques have a positive relationship with Shoptiques. And from a customer standpoint, I mean, our customer experience team, they're taking calls all day, and guaranteed, because I've heard, not only in English. So that has definitely made an impact on our business, and just being able to kind of build and foster those relationships with not only the boutiques, but also the customers that we're partnered with.
Terrence?
Well, in our office, our entire staff, I guess, is diverse. And that's probably it has a lot to do with the nature of what we do. But probably the biggest thing that's made an impact is not so much diversity from a gender or racial background, but it's probably a diversity from an age background, and bringing in younger people who have various and different ideas of how we can do things that we've done over the course of the last 40 years that the organization's been in existence. The advent of people who are able to get our message across via social media, that some of the more mature people on our staff may not be as familiar with, such as myself. That has been helpful. So it's been those kinds of things. I think it's more age than diversity from a standpoint of either gender or race.
We talked about all the positive point of the culture diversity. Would you like to share the negative side of it?
And you're looking at, for me to go first on that one. For me, there's no negative. There's no negative in building a diversified workforce at all. I think it's challenging. I think it's something that isn't necessarily always front of mind for all the reasons that Nicole had given to us earlier with regard to our biases and the way that we hire, and as I said, the individuals who are attracted to our brand. It takes a lot of effort, and sometimes we don't have a lot of time in the day, so effort to pursue more diverse applicants is a challenge. But there's no downside to it. There's only upside to it, and I think we need to do more of it than we're doing today.
Nicole, I want to ask you the same question a little bit differently, because you are the top executive here in the finance world. When you start hiring people at a very high level, and you have staff of different nationality, different culture, the person you're interviewing, I must say, in employment, it works both ways. You want to hire the best person, and the employee wants to have the best employer. So when an employee sitting on the other side sees 5 individuals interviewing him, and 3 of them are, with a different background, does it really help the employee, or does it hurt? Or it says, I don't want this company where you have such a large culture diversity?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because in general it helps us. Because relative to other financial services firms in the United States, we're much more global. So people look at us, our staff is very diverse. The career opportunities for people are very diverse geographically, so people can move from one part of the world to another. And that's valued more by some people than others. And so it's interesting when we review who turned us down to go somewhere else, I actually will occasionally see a comment that says, like, feels too global. So I guess occasionally you'll find, and I think and by the way, that's only in the United States. We don't get that comment in anywhere else. And I think that is the reason, is the U.S. is a little bit more kind of isolated than the rest of the world. And so we actually do see some people who say, oh, this is too much diversity for me.
Right? Eric?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the person. And if I put a candidate in a room with 5 interviewers on a panel, and 3 of those interviewers are of diversity and 2 aren't, I think if that candidate decides that they don't want to work for our company because of that, then that's probably a candidate that we didn't want in the first place. Thank you.
I like this.
So I really think it depends on the candidate, and I think it's, it might be a good way to screen out people, so yeah.
We're very happy with that, turned down reason.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, sir.
Well, our business is diversity, all day, every day. So, what we look at is what can we do to put our clients in the best position so that their businesses can continue to grow and prosper. Breaking down whatever barriers there may be, working with our business owners so that they're in the best position to present themselves in the best way possible so that the opportunities that are available they can take advantage of. That's what we do. So we are constantly working on ways with the clients that we have to ensure that not only do they have the opportunity to take advantage of opportunities when they come to available, but when they do come available, that they are considered in the same manner that anybody else would be considered. That's basically what we do, and we've been successful in doing it, and it's not easy. It's because as I said before, people are resistant to change. People have comfort zones that they like to work in, and if you've known somebody for 25 years and you've been doing business with them for 25 years, it's kind of hard to all of a sudden decide to do business with somebody you don't know. That's just how things are, and that's how people are. So we recognize that, and we try to work with companies to overcome some of those opportunities, some of those situations. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends upon, because you're dealing, no matter how many programs you have, you're dealing with humans. And, as I mentioned before, and I can't stress it enough, a lot of large companies have supplier diversity programs where they say that they want to do business with diverse business owners. But the program is really only as good as the commitment from the top down, and it's only as good as the person who's administering the program and the people who do the buying. But if they are set and upon dealing with certain business owners, that's what they're going to deal with. If they are open to doing business and looking at new opportunities and new products and services that other business owners can provide, then you may have an entry point where some new business owners can get in. But once again, it really depends upon the person you're dealing with and the organization you're dealing with.
Before I open the floor for the question and answer, I just want to take a minute to say thank you very much to the panelists, Derek, Terrence, Nicole, Patricia, for taking your time out to come and talk to our students. And of course, my heartiest thank goes to Christine for putting things together. I just give you the idea and you run with that. I don't see Nicole here, but Nicole is equally involved in every project we do. So let's give them a big hand. Okay, so let me start with question and answers. And all those who are online, please speak into your microphone because we cannot hear you. Thank you. Online individuals can also ask the question as long as you're speaking right into the microphone. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, my name is Kate. I'm an 8th semester ITM student. And my question is more for the panelists who are involved in HR. With gay rights and transgender rights being a more controversial topic here in the US, how do you plan to deal with opening up your employees and making sure that everyone is willing to take that diverse aspect into the workforce and, kind of introducing that to employees who might not be as open to it.
Any volunteers?
Sure. Yeah. Why not? So, I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's actually something that the past few companies that I've worked for, it's been something that we've discussed, and at Shop Teaks in particular, I mean, it's something that's really important to us, and I mean, a silly example, but just as an example, on Sunday night, we recently celebrated our 4-year anniversary. And we had our 4-year anniversary at a club in Hell's Kitchen that is typically known as a gay club. And I think introducing your employees to that type of environment, and someone actually expressed a concern and said, "What if someone doesn't feel comfortable in this environment?" It was a really proud moment for me because our founder and our CEO was like, well, if that person doesn't feel comfortable, then they're probably not a good fit for this company. So I think having we've talked several times about the senior leadership team, having a senior leadership team that's open to different backgrounds, different cultures, different beliefs, I think that really feeds into the rest of the company. And again, this country is always evolving. It's always changing. There's always going to be work that needs to be done. But I think if you slowly introduce that into the company and not forced, but those who want to partake in those types of events, they will. And the ones who don't, won't. So.
All right.
I was just going to add to that one of the things that the company can do and that we do to communicate to the population that we support all different types of lifestyles is we make sure that all of our benefits reflect that. So we have benefits for all types of different lifestyles and different ways of building families and a variety of different things. So I think if all of your programs reflect that you are an open culture and accepting of all types of different cultures, then I think that resonates with the associates and it doesn't necessarily become an issue. At least it doesn't for us. And that's been my experience at my past few companies.
I would just add, at least in the United States, we have a very active open network. And one of the things we do, I mean, the firm, first of all, supports these networks financially so that they can have events and have informal drinks, which is a great networking thing. But that organization in particular opens up every event, and they say, Alliance members welcome, right? So people go, to support them, and so I think that sends a strong message. And the other thing that we did is we have each of those networks is supported by one of our most senior managers, who's out there saying, I support this. This is important to me, and I think certainly over the last 10 years that terrain has changed so much where it's a non-issue. I mean, we had somebody who went through a gender identity change and people were a little worried, but it was a complete non-issue. And so I think it's great that we've made that kind of progress.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for all the insights tonight. My name is Philotea. I'm actually an exchange student from London, and I have a question for the ladies, for Mrs. Nicole and Ms. Patricia. I wanted to ask you, as women working in a diverse industry, as we found out tonight, how do you deal with being seen more of a serious professional and less of being seen just as women? How do you make that transition from just being taken very seriously as to what your concerns are and who you're representing in the industry?
I'll make a couple of comments on that. When I started, it was really funny. A friend of my, somewhat older friend, gave me ties, like little paisley ties, like to wear that I could. So that was that at the time. It was like that was what you did. You dressed in the most absolute conservative suit, pants, whatever, were every bit of your body covered. That was what you did to try to kind of gain some legitimacy, and I think that's gotten broader today, but I do think actually appearances matter on that kind of thing. And so, dressing to be taken seriously in the context, whatever meeting you're in, I think is one element of it still today, even though there's a much broader range of what you can wear and be professional. And then I guess another piece of it is once you get to a certain level in an organization, then that gives you a lot of credibility with people. And so it's I think much more of an issue for people who are early on in their careers than it is for senior people, because then you have a title and you have people working for you and you have an organizational structure, so it becomes less of an issue.
I have a question online.
Oh.
This one is from Bruno. He wants to know what's the best way to go about starting the topic of diversity in a startup environment.
Derek, why don't you take that? Because you're the startup.
Yes, I'll take this. So I'm in my third startup. Very clear to say that I love startup environments for a reason. And I've worked for a large corporation. I've worked for startups. Each of those have their benefits. They have their perks. They have their downfalls. And I think for me in a startup, we're so welcoming of everyone's ideas and everyone's suggestions. And now at Shoptiques, I've never worked for a company where every single person's voice is heard, regardless of the position that you're in, whether you're in an entry-level role, an intern, a VP, an EVP. Everyone really has the opportunity to be heard. And I think it's much, much easier to talk about things like diversity and to bring that up in an environment where people want to hear what you have to say, and then they're open to that. And specifically our founder, she is a very, very transparent leader, where at any given time you always know where the business stands. And going back to starting from the top down, I think that makes it a lot easier in a startup environment to kind of bring up these types of issues.
Okay.
If you don't mind, is it okay? Would you mind if I
Sure, please,
responded
go
to
ahead.
that question
Sure,
before?
Sure, please.
Because I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that certainly I've wrestled with throughout the course of my career. I've had it a little bit easier because I'm in retail and in fashion, and that's a much more supportive environment, I think, for women. If you don't mind that I say that, I think that when I sit around the table at the 30% Club, which I'm a part of, I actually see the challenges. The challenges are so much greater in some other industries, certainly like finance. But one of the things that you just have to be super aware of is that you don't necessarily have to relinquish being feminine in order to be powerful. Women are powerful, and and you can wear pink and be powerful. And I just ensure you do have to work very hard. Every single meeting that I go to, I make sure that I'm showing up, I'm prepared, I know what I'm talking about. And you just have to feel confident in yourself that you are just as effective and just as powerful as the man sitting next to you. And just never forget that, because very often, and sorry for some of the other men in the room, they don't struggle with that as much. They are very confident. There was one mentor who I spoke with where she said that when she was offered a job, she thought, well, I'm qualified for 95% of the job, but she kept thinking about that other 5% that she wasn't qualified for. And very often when a man gets offered a job, he may only be able to do 50% of the job, but he does not care at all about the other 50% that he cannot do. He's going to show up like he can do it. So we have to start thinking about that how much we do bring to the table, and focus on that rather than the small elements that you might not bring to the table, because the other things that you're bringing to the table are so incredibly important to the whole package. So that's what I want to say about that.
Hi, I'm Hollis, and I'm an ITM student as well. And I guess my question kind of echoes what you just spoke about, both of you. And one of the issues that I read about in Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, is how women need to find mentors, and how there's a big issue in the apprehension of a lot of males in mentoring young women because of the way that it may look. So I guess my question for all the panelists is there anything that you're doing in your company in order to make it a safe environment and to encourage males to mentor young females so that they can thrive in the business world?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I literally once had a senior manager say to me they would never take a young woman who worked for them to lunch. And I was like, how can you say that? Because would you take a young man? Of course I would take a young man, great. But that's a problem, right? That you won't take a young woman to lunch. And so, beyond trying to kind of raise awareness around issues like that so that the women aren't being left out of going to lunch, we do have programs where we do mentoring in groups. And so let's say one of our very senior executives will take on, let's say, 3 or 4 young women. And they're not that they don't meet solo, but the women work on a project together for that senior executive, and it gives them really good visibility inside the organization because they have a mandate to basically, they're working on some project for the CEO or somebody like the CEO. They're going through the organization, they're getting exposure to people. But we have to construct things like that because actually, I still think that's an issue. But I think, obviously, I make a point of taking everyone that works to me to lunch because I want to make sure that people don't feel like they can't have a social interaction at work. So I think it's really important to try to kind of make it feel like it's a non-issue as much as possible, but we know sometimes it is an issue for people, and so we try to kind of construct support around it.
I think you had. Yeah,
Hi. Just wanted to make sure no one else was out. So my name is Casey. I'm also an ITM major. I was just wanted to ask the question similarly to the woman who spoke about gay rights. I wanted to know how you feel and what you're doing to encourage your company and your clients as well as your people who work for you about different types of people who work and thrive with disabilities and how you're attracting that talent and how you're working with that talent and how you intend to, make that important to your brand and to your company.
Well, first and foremost, we do look for the talent. If an individual has the talent, that's the individual who we want. So whether or not they have a disability, we're going to go after them. It's interesting because I think we have such a supportive culture internally. We're 80% female culture. There does seem to be a very maternal aspect to it. So we really don't wrestle with things like that. It's a very inclusive culture. And I think that when everybody is simply just focused on bringing the right talent in the door, everything else seems to fall away. So we don't necessarily have a lot of programs where we have to train on the sensitivity of those things. It seems to just happen within our organization, but certainly pass it on to some of the other larger organizations that may have better insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously something that's that we do focus on, and we have programs, again, to support people if necessary. We make accommodations of all types, right? It can be someone working from home, someone, there's a guy who works around the corner from me who's almost blind, and he has the world's most enormous computer screen. So it can be, it's whatever the accommodation is, that, to your point, allows somebody who can make a big contribution to make that contribution.
Can we have online question? Do we have anything out there? Okay, so we'll take. All right, can we take the next question? All right. Okay, I thank you all of you for coming to this important forum. Have a great night.